The golden afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the small, picturesque town of Haven Ridge. Children laughed and shouted as they raced around the park, their joy blending with the faint rustle of autumn leaves. Rachel Carter sat on a bench, her back straight but her demeanor relaxed. Dressed in a simple flannel shirt and jeans, she looked like any other single mom enjoying a quiet moment while her child played. But Rachel's watchful eyes told a different story, one of a woman who had seen too much of the world's shadows to ever let her guard down. Her son, Noah, an energetic 8-year-old with sandy blonde hair, was happily chasing a soccer ball across the grass with a group of other kids. His laughter was infectious, and Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Moments like this reminded her why she had left her old life behind. The serenity was shattered by a deep, throaty rumble. Rachel stiffened slightly as the sound of motorcycle engines grew louder, drowning out the park's peaceful ambience. She instinctively glanced at Noah, ensuring he was safe, then turned her attention to the source of the noise. A convoy of motorcycles appeared on the horizon, gleaming in the sunlight like metal beasts. They rolled into the park with an air of menace, their riders dressed in black leather jackets adorned with the insignia of a flaming vulture. Rachel's heart sank. She recognized the emblem instantly. It belonged to the Iron Vultures, a notorious motorcycle gang that had been making headlines across the region for their violent intimidation tactics. Parents began pulling their children closer as the bikers parked near the playground. The leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a jagged scar across his cheek, dismounted first. His name was Lucas Kane, and his reputation for ruthlessness preceded him. Kane surveyed the park like a predator sizing up his prey. "Good afternoon, folks," Kane called out, his voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Beautiful day for a little community bonding, don't you think?" Rachel's pulse quickened, but she remained seated, her expression neutral. She noted the way Kane's men spread out, subtly positioning themselves to block the park's main exits. This wasn't a random visit. It was a calculated move. "Mom, look." Noah's voice broke through her thoughts. He was pointing to the highest swing on the playground, where he was preparing to launch himself into the air. Rachel forced a smile. "That's great, sweetheart. Be careful." Her voice was steady, but her mind raced. She couldn't risk alarming Noah or the other parents, but she needed to stay alert. Kane sauntered toward a group of parents gathered near the picnic tables. "I hear Haven Ridge is a nice, quiet town." "That's good. Quiet towns tend to stay safe when everyone looks out for each other." Rachel clenched her jaw. She recognized the veiled threat. The Iron Vultures had been spreading their reach, extorting small towns under the guise of protection. One of the fathers, a wiry man in a baseball cap, stepped forward. "We don't need your kind of protection here," he said, his voice shaking slightly. Kane's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, I think you'll change your mind. Accidents happen all the time. Kids fall, cars catch fire, businesses have break-ins. It'd be a shame if something like that happened here." Rachel stood, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. She walked toward Noah, who was now running toward her with his soccer ball. "Time to go, buddy," she said softly, her eyes scanning the bikers. "But I'm not tired yet." Noah protested. "Now, Noah," Rachel said, her tone firm but gentle. As they walked toward the car, Rachel felt Kane's eyes on her. She resisted the urge to look back. "You've got guts, lady," Kane called out, his voice carrying across the park. "Hope you don't have a reason to regret it." Rachel tightened her grip on Noah's hand but didn't respond. Once they were in the car, she locked the doors and started the engine. She took a long, winding route home, checking her rearview mirror for any signs of being followed. "Mom, who were those men?" Noah asked from the back seat, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Just some people who don't belong here," Rachel said, keeping her tone light. At home, Rachel watched as Noah pulled out his Legos and began building a fortress on the living room floor. She envied his innocence, but knew it wouldn't last forever if the Iron Vultures stayed in Haven Ridge. After putting Noah to bed that night, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She searched for news on the Iron Vultures and found articles detailing their recent activities: arson, extortion, and even reports of human trafficking. She closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She had promised herself when she left the military that she would never go back to that life. But as she thought about Noah and the other children in the town, Rachel knew she couldn't stand by and do nothing. The next morning, Rachel visited the local diner, where she knew Ethan Grayson would be opening up. Ethan was a retired cop who had lived in Haven Ridge for decades. If anyone had their finger on the town's pulse, it was him. As she entered, Ethan looked up from behind the counter. "Morning, Rachel. Coffee?" "Please," she said, sliding onto a stool. Ethan poured her a cup and leaned on the counter. "You look like you've got something on your mind." Rachel hesitated before speaking. "The iron vultures. They were at the park yesterday." Ethan's face darkened. "I heard about that. They've been sniffing around town for weeks. Couple of business owners already paid them off to keep their windows intact." "And if they don't pay?" Rachel asked. Ethan shook his head grimly. "The vultures don't take no for an answer." Rachel sipped her coffee, her mind already formulating a plan. "We can't let them take this town," she said softly. Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If anyone can stop them, it's you." Rachel didn't respond, but her resolve hardened. Haven Ridge was her home now, and she wasn't about to let anyone destroy it. Cliffhanger ending. That night, Rachel found a note taped to her front door. The words, written in bold black ink, read, "Mind your business, or you'll regret it." Rachel crumpled the note in her hand, her eyes blazing with determination. The iron vultures had just made their first mistake. They had underestimated her. The crisp morning air carried the aroma of dew-soaked grass and distant wood smoke as Rachel Carter walked Noah to Haven Ridge Elementary. The school was a cheerful two-story brick building, its walls adorned with murals painted by the students. Noah skipped beside her, his backpack bouncing on his shoulders, unaware of the shadow that had begun to creep over their quiet town. "Don't forget to finish your art project, okay?" Rachel said, kneeling to adjust the strap on his bag. "I will, Mom," Noah replied with a grin. She watched him join the cluster of children heading inside, his excitement palpable. As he disappeared through the doors, Rachel's smile faded. A gnawing sense of unease had settled in her chest since her encounter with the iron vultures at the park. Their presence was a warning, and Rachel knew better than to ignore it. On her way back home, Rachel stopped by Ethan Grayson's diner. The morning rush was in full swing, with townsfolk chatting over coffee and pancakes. Rachel slid into a booth near the back, where Ethan soon joined her, wiping his hands on a towel. "Anything new on our friends?" Rachel asked, keeping her voice low. Ethan nodded grimly. "They hit another business last night. Old Man Garcia's grocery store. Smashed the front window and spray-painted their symbol on the wall. Garcia's scared out of his mind." Rachel sighed, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. "They're escalating, testing how far they can push before someone pushes back." Ethan leaned closer. "You planning on being that someone?" Rachel met his gaze. "I don't have a choice. These people won't stop until they own this town, and I'm not letting that happen." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "If you're serious, you're going to need help. I still have contacts from my law enforcement days. We can start building a network, but we have to be smart. These guys aren't amateurs." Rachel's lips curved into a faint smile. "I'd expect nothing less." That afternoon, Rachel headed to the library, where she worked part-time as a librarian. She spent her shift assisting patrons and shelving books, all the while keeping an ear out for any whispers about the iron vultures. Near closing time, Miss Clara Reynolds, Noah's teacher, came in, her usual bright demeanor shadowed by concern. "Rachel, can I talk to you for a minute?" Clara asked hesitantly. "Of course." Rachel gestured to an empty table. Clara sat down, glancing around nervously. "It's probably nothing, but I thought you should know. A few days ago, some men showed up near the school. They didn't come inside, but they were parked across the street, just watching. When I left work, one of them followed me for a few blocks before turning off." Rachel's jaw tightened. "Did you recognize them?" Clara shook her head. "No, but they fit the description of the gang you mentioned at the park. I didn't think much of it at first, but now—" "You did the right thing telling me," Rachel assured her. "Keep an eye out, and if anything feels off, call me." "Don't wait." Clara nodded, her relief evident. "Thank you. I just want the kids to be safe." "So do I," Rachel said firmly. That evening, Rachel drove around town, studying the places the iron vultures had targeted. The grocery store was still boarded up, its fresh graffiti glaring like a wound on the town's face. She parked a block away and walked the streets, her sharp eyes scanning for anything out of place. Her instincts paid off when she spotted a pair of motorcycles parked in an alley behind a hardware store. Rachel stayed in the shadows, watching as two men, dressed in the gang's trademark leather jackets, exchanged something with a man in a suit. She couldn't hear their conversation, but the tension in their body language was unmistakable. When the exchange was done, the man in the suit walked briskly to a black SUV and drove off, while the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared off in the opposite direction. Rachel's mind raced. The iron vultures weren't just shaking down local businesses. They were part of something bigger. Later that night, Rachel sat at her kitchen table, mapping out the gang's movements. She'd already marked the grocery store, the diner, and the park as locations where the vultures had made their presence known. The hardware store alley was another piece of the puzzle. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a motorcycle engine outside. Rachel froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the drawer where she kept a concealed handgun. She moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. The motorcycle idled for a moment before its rider tossed something onto her porch and sped off. Rachel waited until the sound of the engine faded before stepping outside. A small envelope lay on the porch. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a chilling message. "Stay out of it. This is your only warning." Rachel crumpled the note in her hand, her heart pounding. They knew she was watching. But instead of fear, Rachel felt a surge of resolve. The iron vultures had crossed a line by threatening her. She wasn't going to back down. She was going to fight. The next morning, Rachel met Ethan at the edge of town, where he was waiting with a retired sheriff named Bill Harper. Bill was in his 60s, with a gruff demeanor and a no-nonsense attitude. "So, you're the one stirring the pot," Bill said, sizing her up. Rachel smiled faintly. "Just trying to keep the pot from boiling over." Bill grunted. "I respect that, but these aren't your run-of-the-mill troublemakers. They're organized, and they've got resources. You sure you're up for this?" "I've dealt with worse," Rachel said, her tone steady. Bill nodded approvingly. "Then let's get to work." Over the next few days, Rachel, Ethan, and Bill began laying the groundwork for their resistance. They met with trusted locals, including business owners and teachers, to spread the word about the Iron Vulture's activities. They encouraged the community to stay vigilant and report anything suspicious. Rachel also started preparing her own home, reinforcing locks and installing hidden cameras. She knew the vultures wouldn't back off without a fight. One night, as Rachel reviewed footage from her cameras, she spotted a shadowy figure near her back fence. She grabbed her flashlight and gun, slipping outside silently. "Looking for something?" she called out, her voice calm but firm. The figure froze, then turned and ran. Rachel didn't give chase. She'd made her point. Cliffhanger. At a town meeting, the mayor announced a sudden push to approve a new development project spearheaded by an out-of-town company. Rachel's instincts flared. Something about the timing felt off. As the meeting ended, Rachel spotted Lucas Kane leaning casually against a lamppost outside, watching her with a knowing smirk. The Iron Vultures weren't just targeting Haven Ridge. They were embedding themselves in its foundation. Rachel Carter's mornings often began the same way. Coffee brewing in the kitchen, Noah working through his breakfast while talking a mile a minute about school. But today, the warm rhythm was broken by a sense of looming danger that Rachel couldn't shake. She watched Noah spoon cereal into his mouth, his feet swinging beneath the table. "You sure you're okay, Mom?" he asked, noticing her silence. Rachel smiled faintly. "I'm fine, buddy. Just thinking about some work." "Is it about those guys on motorcycles?" Noah asked, his voice hushed. Rachel's smile faltered. "Why do you ask?" Noah shrugged. "I heard Mr. Garcia talking about them when we went to the store. He said they're bad news." "They are," Rachel admitted, her voice firm, "but I don't want you worrying about them. That's grown-up stuff." Noah nodded solemnly. "Okay, Mom." Rachel ruffled his hair. "Finish up. We're going to be late for school." After dropping Noah off, Rachel stopped by the diner to meet Ethan and Bill Harper. They'd been working tirelessly to gather information on the Iron Vultures and their ties to the mysterious development project now threatening Haven Ridge. Ethan slid a folder across the table. "We've got something. A contact of mine in the county clerk's office pulled this for us. Permits for the land they're trying to buy up. They're using shell companies, all tied to a group called Horizon Holdings." "Horizon Holdings?" Rachel repeated, her brow furrowing. Bill nodded. "I looked into them. It's a front for a larger operation, Black Horizon. They're tied to organized crime, smuggling, and worse." Rachel's stomach churned. She flipped through the documents, recognizing patterns she'd seen during her military career: hidden ownership structures, offshore accounts, and names linked to known criminal syndicates. "This is bigger than the Vultures," Rachel said, her voice tight. "They're just the muscle." Ethan leaned back, his arms crossed. "If Black Horizon's involved, they're not going to let a small-town mom and a retired cop stand in their way." Rachel met his gaze, her eyes cold. "Then we'll have to be smarter than they are." As the day wore on, Rachel's memories began to surface, ghosts from her time as a Navy SEAL. She had spent years in the shadows, tracking high-value targets, dismantling dangerous networks, and eliminating threats. Her husband, Ben, had been her teammate and anchor during those missions. But then came the mission that changed everything. The memory hit her like a wave. The deafening roar of an ambush, the sting of betrayal when they realized their mission details had been leaked, and the horror of watching Ben fall in the chaos. The mission had been classified, the details buried, and Rachel had been left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Now, in Haven Ridge, the shadows of her past felt closer than ever. Rachel spent the evening reviewing the surveillance footage from the cameras she had installed around her property. Around midnight, movement caught her eye, a figure loitering near her backyard fence. Rachel grabbed her flashlight and handgun, stepping outside without a sound. Her movements were fluid and deliberate, honed by years of training. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharp. The figure froze, then darted into the woods. Rachel followed for a few yards before stopping. It was a warning, she realized. They were watching her. When she returned to the house, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Last chance. Walk away, or you and your kid pay the price." Rachel's jaw tightened. She deleted the message, her resolve hardening. The next morning, Rachel met Clara Reynolds at the school. Clara's face was pale, her eyes darting nervously. "They were back," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Two of them, parked across the street again. One of them even came into the school, pretending to ask about enrollment." "What did you tell them?" Rachel asked, her voice steady. "Nothing," Clara said quickly, "but they were looking around, like they were sizing up the place." Rachel's fists clenched. The school was becoming a target, and she wasn't going to let that happen. "Listen, Clara," Rachel said, placing a reassuring hand on the teacher's shoulder. "If they come back, you call me immediately. And make sure all the teachers know the lockdown procedures. Just in case." Clara nodded, her trust in Rachel clear. Rachel returned home to find Ethan waiting for her. He had brought a map of Haven Ridge, with key locations marked in red. "We've identified their strongholds," Ethan said, pointing to several spots on the map. "The park, the hardware store, and now a garage on the east side of town. That's where they're keeping their bikes and supplies." Rachel studied the map, her mind working through possibilities. "We need to hit them where it hurts. Disrupt their operations. Make this town too much trouble for them." Bill, who had arrived moments earlier, frowned. "That's a dangerous game, Rachel. These people don't scare easy." "Neither do I," Rachel replied, her voice like steel. That night, Rachel made her move. Dressed in dark clothing, she approached the garage on the east side of town. It was quiet, but the faint sound of voices inside told her the vultures were present. Rachel crept closer, using the shadows as cover. She placed a small, wireless camera near the building's entrance, ensuring she could monitor their activity remotely. Then, she slipped away, leaving no trace of her presence. Back at home, Rachel watched the live feed on her laptop. The vultures were discussing something big, the shipment, they called it. From the snippets she could catch, it was clear the operation was tied to Black Horizon. Cliffhanger. As Rachel reviewed the footage, a new voice entered the conversation. Calm, authoritative, and chilling. Keep everything on schedule, the man said. The boss doesn't tolerate mistakes. And make sure no one snooping around makes it out alive. The man stepped into view, and Rachel's blood ran cold. She recognized him from her military past. Victor Hale, a former intelligence operative with a reputation for brutality. Hale wasn't just muscle. He was a mastermind. Rachel leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Black Horizon had sent one of their best to Haven Ridge, and now, she wasn't just fighting to protect her town. She was fighting to stay alive. Rachel Carter stood in her dimly lit living room, her eyes fixed on the live feed from the camera she had planted at the Iron Vulture's garage. Victor Hale's face filled the screen, his cold expression sending a chill through her. Hale wasn't just another enforcer. He was a tactician, the kind of man who thrived in chaos and knew how to create it. She had hoped to keep the fight contained to the gang, but Hale's arrival changed everything. This wasn't just about extortion or intimidation anymore. Black Horizon was here, and they were operating on a scale far beyond Haven Ridge. Rachel's phone buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was Ethan. "Rachel, we've got trouble," he said without preamble. "Bill just called. A convoy of vultures rolled into town. They've set up camp near the old sawmill." Rachel exhaled slowly, her mind already calculating. They're consolidating. Hale must have given the order. "Whatever they're planning, it's big," Ethan said. "We need to act fast." The next day, Rachel called a meeting with Ethan, Bill, and Clara Reynolds. Clara had insisted on being involved after hearing about Hale's presence and the potential danger to the school. They gathered in the back room of Ethan's diner, away from prying eyes. "We've confirmed at least a dozen bikers at the sawmill," Rachel began, spreading a map of Haven Ridge on the table. "They're bringing in supplies and setting up surveillance. They're not just passing through, they're digging in." "What's their end game?" Clara asked, her voice tense. Rachel pointed to a cluster of buildings marked in red on the map. "Black Horizon isn't here for protection money. They're using the vultures to clear out small businesses and properties. Once the town folds, they'll take control of key locations and use them for whatever criminal operations they're running, trafficking, smuggling, maybe worse." Bill grunted. "So, we're dealing with a full-scale takeover." Rachel nodded. "And Hale's the one pulling the strings." Ethan leaned forward. "What's our next move?" "We disrupt them," Rachel said firmly. "Hale's bringing order to the vultures. If we take out their infrastructure and sow confusion, we can force them to pull back." That night, Rachel and Ethan executed the first phase of their plan. Using the information gathered from the surveillance feeds, they targeted the gang's supply routes. Dressed in black, Rachel waited near the narrow bridge that connected the sawmill to the main road. A truck carrying supplies rumbled toward her position. Rachel sprang into action, deploying a spike strip across the road. The truck screeched to a halt, its tires shredded. Ethan, stationed nearby, emerged from the shadows and slashed the vehicle's fuel line. Gasoline pooled beneath the truck as the driver scrambled out, cursing. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice trembling. Rachel remained hidden, watching as the driver abandoned the truck and fled toward the sawmill. Once the coast was clear, Rachel and Ethan removed the spike strip and slipped away, leaving the disabled truck as a message. The next morning, Victor Hale surveyed the wreckage at the sawmill, his sharp eyes assessing the damage. The supply truck was a total loss, and the vultures were on edge. "This wasn't an accident," Hale said, his tone calm but dangerous. "Someone's working against us." Lucas Kane scowled. "Probably that librarian. She's been sniffing around." Hale's expression didn't change. "Then deal with her, quietly, and find out if she is help. I don't tolerate loose ends." Rachel's instincts told her the vultures would retaliate, and she was right. That afternoon, as she left the library, she noticed a black motorcycle parked across the street. The rider wore a helmet with a tinted visor, but Rachel could feel his gaze on her. She didn't go straight home. Instead, she took a winding route through town, using alleys and side streets to lose the tail. When she was certain she wasn't being followed, she doubled back to Ethan's diner. Inside, Ethan and Bill were already waiting. "We've got a problem," Rachel said. "They're watching me." Hales ordered them to escalate. Then we hit back harder, Ethan said. No, Rachel said firmly. We stick to the plan. Confusion is our weapon. If we push too hard, Hale will start taking bigger risks, and that's when we strike. That night, Rachel worked alone, targeting one of the gang's key communication hubs, a small trailer hidden behind the sawmill. She crawled through the underbrush, her movements silent. She planted a small EMP device near the trailer's power source, then retreated to a safe distance. When she triggered the device, the trailer's lights flickered and died. She watched through binoculars as gang members scrambled to fix the problem, their frustration evident. Satisfied, Rachel slipped away, leaving no trace of her presence. The next morning, Rachel visited Clara at the school. They walked the perimeter together, discussing security measures. Rachel noticed a black SUV parked a block away, its windows tinted. They're keeping tabs on the school, Rachel said, her tone grim. We need to be ready. Clara's face hardened. What do you need me to do? Rachel hesitated. If something happens, you need to get the kids into lockdown and keep them safe. No hesitation, no second guessing. Clara nodded. You can count on me. Meanwhile, Hale was growing more frustrated. The attacks on his supply lines and equipment were taking a toll, and his men were starting to question his leadership. We need to flush them out, Hale told Kane. Force them to make a mistake. What about the school? Kane asked. We've been watching it. Seems important to her. Hale's lips curled into a cold smile. Then that's where we apply pressure. But no bloodshed, not yet. Let's see how she reacts. Cliffhanger. That evening, Rachel returned home to find a single piece of paper taped to her front door. It read, "The school. Tomorrow. Noon." Rachel's heart pounded as she stared at the note. Hale had just made his move, and the stakes had never been higher. The next morning, the air in Haven Ridge was unusually still, as if the town itself sensed the storm brewing. Rachel Carter paced her living room, the note from her door clutched in her hand. The words echoed in her mind, the school. Tomorrow. Noon. Hale wasn't bluffing. He was setting a trap, daring her to act. Rachel knew the iron vultures wouldn't strike in broad daylight without a plan, and she had to be ready. At 8 a.m., Rachel met Ethan and Bill in the back room of the diner. The usual din of morning chatter was absent as the town seemed to hold its collective breath. Clara confirmed there's a charity event at the school today, Rachel said, spreading a map of the school grounds on the table. Parents, teachers, and students, all in one place. It's the perfect target. Bill's brow furrowed. You think they'll hit during the event? Rachel nodded. It's a public setting. They'll use it to send a message, and they'll be watching to see how I react. Ethan folded his arms. What's the play? We turn their trap into ours, Rachel replied. We'll be ready for them. By mid-morning, Rachel had laid the groundwork for her plan. Clara had discreetly informed the teachers about the potential danger, and they reviewed lockdown procedures. Rachel stationed Bill and Ethan near the school's perimeter with radios and cameras to monitor the area. Rachel also enlisted help from two trusted townsfolk, Jack Morales, a former EMT who volunteered to assist with evacuation if needed, and Maria Lopez, a local tech enthusiast who would monitor the surveillance feeds. The charity event began at 11 a.m., drawing families and children to the school's gymnasium. Rachel kept a low profile, staying near the exits while scanning the crowd for anything out of place. The first sign of trouble came at 11:30 a.m. Rachel noticed a man lingering near the gym entrance, wearing a ball cap pulled low over his face. His stance was casual, but his eyes darted around like he was looking for something or someone. Rachel tapped her earpiece. Ethan, Bill, check the cameras. We've got a potential scout at the main entrance. Ethan's voice crackled back. Got him. He's not alone. Two more near the parking lot. Rachel's pulse quickened. They were moving into position. At exactly noon, the sound of motorcycles shattered the event's peaceful atmosphere. Rachel turned toward the gym's windows and saw a convoy of iron vultures pulling into the parking lot. The gym fell silent as parents and teachers exchanged uneasy glances. Clara quickly stepped forward, her voice steady. Everyone stay calm. Let's take this opportunity to show the kids some safety drills. Please follow the staff's instructions. Her calm demeanor helped ease the tension, and the teachers began guiding students toward the designated lockdown areas. Rachel stayed near the gym entrance, her eyes fixed on the approaching bikers. Lucas Kane dismounted first, his posture confident, his leather jacket gleaming with the Iron Vulture's insignia. The doors creaked open, and Kane stepped inside, flanked by 2 gang members. His grin was equal parts charm and menace. "Afternoon, folks. Hope we're not interrupting." Rachel stepped forward, blocking his path. "You're not welcome here, Kane. Leave now." Kane's grin widened. "We're just here to have a little chat. No need to get all worked up." Rachel's jaw tightened. She knew better than to take the bait. "The police are on their way," she said coldly. "You've got 2 minutes to clear out." Kane chuckled. "Police? In this town? Please. They barely know how to write a parking ticket." Outside, Ethan and Bill watched the other bikers spread out around the school grounds. Ethan's voice came through Rachel's earpiece. "They're circling the building. Looks like they're trying to block the exits." Rachel's mind raced. The gang wasn't here for a conversation. They were staging an attack. "Bill," she said quietly, "get Jack and Maria ready. If this goes south, we'll need an evacuation plan." "Copy that," Bill replied. Kane took a step closer to Rachel, his voice dropping. "Here's how this works. You pay, or things get messy. Real messy. And believe me, lady, you don't want that." Rachel didn't flinch. "This isn't your town, Kane. It never will be." Kane's expression darkened. "You've got guts. I'll give you that. But guts won't save you." Behind him, one of the bikers raised a hand to his ear, listening to an unseen communicator. He nodded subtly, signaling Kane. "They're making a move," Rachel muttered into her earpiece. In a swift motion, Kane turned to leave, his grin returning. "You'll come around, Carter. They always do." As the bikers exited, Rachel noticed one of them slip something beneath a parked car near the school's entrance. Her stomach dropped. "Bomb," she whispered into her mic. "Get the kids out now." Inside, Clara and the teachers had already begun evacuating the children to the gym's secure storage area, reinforced room designed for storm sheltering. Outside, Rachel sprinted toward the parking lot, her heart pounding. She reached the car and spotted the device, a crudely made explosive wired to a timer. "Jack, I need you," Rachel said into her mic. "Parking lot, northeast corner. Bring the kit." Moments later, Jack arrived, his hands steady as he examined the device. "I can disarm it," he said, "but I'll need a few minutes." "You've got 2, Rachel said, keeping watch. Meanwhile, Ethan and Bill intercepted 2 bikers attempting to block the rear exit. The retired lawman's experience paid off as they subdued the gang members quickly and quietly, leaving them zip-tied and hidden from view. "Rear exit clear," Ethan reported. Back in the parking lot, Jack worked quickly, his hands moving with practiced precision. "Got it," he finally said, holding up the now disarmed explosive. Rachel exhaled in relief. "Good work. Get it out of here." As Jack carried the device to safety, Rachel spotted Hale standing at the edge of the lot, his eyes locked on her. He gave her a slow, mocking clap before turning and walking away. Rachel's blood boiled, but she held her ground. Hale had underestimated her, and she intended to keep it that way. Cliffhanger. That evening, Rachel reviewed the footage from the day's events. Among the recordings was a chilling discovery. Hale had planted not 1, but 2 additional devices. One was still unaccounted for. Her heart sank as she realized that Hale wasn't finished yet. The real battle was only beginning. The night was heavy with tension as Rachel Carter sat in her darkened living room, the disarmed explosive device lying on her coffee table like a grim reminder of the day's events. The Iron Vultures had made their move, but Hale's strategy was clear. Today was just a warning shot. Rachel's mind churned as she replayed the footage from her surveillance cameras, analyzing every angle, every face, and every action. 1 bomb disarmed, but 2 others had been planted. One was already accounted for and secured by Ethan and Bill, but the 3rd device remained missing. Somewhere in Haven Ridge, Hale had left another cruel surprise, and the clock was ticking. Her phone buzzed. It was Maria Lopez, the tech-savvy ally who had been monitoring the surveillance feeds from the diner. "Rachel, you're going to want to see this." "What is it?" Rachel asked, grabbing her jacket and heading out the door. "They didn't just plant bombs. Hale was running recon on the entire town, Maria said, her voice tight with urgency. He's been mapping escape routes, key locations, and she hesitated. And what? And people, Maria finished. He knows who your allies are. He knows about Clara, Jack, Bill, and even Ethan. Rachel's grip on the phone tightened. Hale wasn't just playing offense. He was preparing to dismantle every piece of resistance she had built. At the diner, Maria spread out a series of images and maps she had printed from the intercepted data. Rachel, Ethan, and Bill leaned over the table, their faces grim as they studied Hale's plans. "This is more than an intimidation campaign," Rachel said, pointing to one of the maps. "He's treating Haven Ridge like a battlefield. These aren't random acts of violence. They're coordinated attacks meant to destabilize the town." "And this," Maria added, sliding over a document, "I hacked into one of their external servers. Black Horizon isn't just using the vultures to clear out small towns. They're building a network of hubs for trafficking operations, people, drugs, weapons. Haven Ridge is set to become a critical waypoint." Ethan's face darkened. "If we let them entrench here, it's over. We'll never get them out." "We won't let it happen," Rachel said firmly. "How?" Bill asked. "They've got numbers, resources, and now Hale. We're a handful of people, Rachel. Even with the town rallying behind us, we're no match for this kind of firepower." Rachel's gaze was steady. "We're not fighting them head-on. We don't need to beat their numbers or their resources. We just need to cut the head off the snake." Maria nodded. "Hale is their anchor here. Take him out, and the rest will fold." "But Hale's not the real head," Rachel said, holding up one of the documents Maria had uncovered. "Black Horizon is. If we want to stop this for good, we need to expose them. That means gathering evidence, not just of what they're doing here, but of their entire operation." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "And how do we do that?" Rachel pulled out a flash drive and placed it on the table. "We take their secrets." The plan was bold and dangerous, but it was their best shot. Using the data Maria had retrieved, Rachel pinpointed the location of Black Horizon's local server, an underground facility hidden beneath an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. "That's where they're storing their communication logs, shipping manifests, and transaction records," Rachel explained. "If we get in, we can download everything. It'll be enough to expose Black Horizon and bring the feds down on them." "And if we get caught?" Bill asked. "We won't," Rachel said, her voice unwavering. The team spent the next few hours preparing. Maria set up a remote monitoring station at the diner, while Ethan and Bill mapped out the best approach to the warehouse. Rachel, ever meticulous, prepared her gear with the precision of a soldier heading into enemy territory. Just after midnight, Rachel approached the warehouse under the cover of darkness. She moved silently, her black clothing blending into the shadows. Ethan and Bill provided overwatch from a nearby ridge, their radios crackling softly with updates. "2 guards at the east entrance," Ethan reported. "Looks like they're packing heat." "Copy that," Rachel whispered. She crept closer, using the overgrown foliage as cover. The guards were chatting casually, their posture relaxed. Amateurs compared to what Rachel was used to. With swift, calculated movements, she incapacitated them both, ensuring they wouldn't raise the alarm. Inside the warehouse, the air was stale, and the faint hum of machinery echoed off the concrete walls. Rachel navigated the labyrinthine corridors with care, her eyes scanning for traps or surveillance cameras. Finally, she found the server room. Rows of humming servers filled the space, their blinking lights casting eerie shadows. Rachel plugged the flash drive into the central console and began the download. "Maria, I'm in," she said softly into her radio. "Good," Maria replied. "I'm monitoring from here. Download should take 5 minutes." Rachel's heart pounded as the progress bar crawled forward. She checked her surroundings constantly, every sound and shadow setting her on edge. "Rachel," Ethan's voice crackled through the radio, "we've got movement outside. Looks like Hale's men are sweeping the perimeter." "Understood," Rachel said. The download reached 75% when the door to the server room burst open. Rachel spun, her weapon raised, to find Victor Hale standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 armed men. "You're predictable, Carter," Hale said. his voice dripping with condescension. Rachel didn't respond. She stepped sideways, putting herself between the console and Hale. "You think you can stop this?" Hale continued, gesturing to the servers. "You think one town matters to people like Black Horizon? You're a speck of dust in a storm, Rachel. Nothing you do here changes that." Rachel's grip tightened on her weapon. "Maybe not," she said evenly, "but it's a start." Hale smirked. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But guts don't mean much when you're dead." He raised his weapon, but Rachel moved first. A well-aimed shot hit the light above them, plunging the room into darkness. Chaos erupted as Rachel used the shadows to her advantage, taking out Hale's men with precision strikes. Hale, however, was more skilled than his subordinates, and their clash was brutal. The download completed just as Rachel managed to disarm Hale and pin him against the console. "You've already lost," Hale sneered, blood dripping from a cut on his temple. "Maybe," Rachel replied, pulling the flash drive from the console. "But you're going to watch Black Horizon fall." Rachel escaped the warehouse just as reinforcements arrived, slipping away into the night with the evidence in hand. Back at the diner, Maria began uploading the data to secure servers and contacting federal authorities. The information was explosive: proof of Black Horizon's trafficking network, connections to corrupt officials, and their plans to expand nationwide. As dawn broke over Haven Ridge, Rachel stood on the diner's porch, watching the first federal vehicles roll into town. Hale had been taken into custody, and the Iron Vultures were scattered. But Rachel knew this was just the beginning. Black Horizon was bigger than one town, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. By morning, Haven Ridge buzzed with a cautious energy. Federal agents swarmed the warehouse Rachel had infiltrated, collecting the servers and other evidence Rachel's team had uncovered. The town's residents, shaken by the sudden arrival of law enforcement and the night's events, began piecing together the truth about the Iron Vultures and their ties to Black Horizon. Rachel Carter stood near the edge of the school playground, her arms crossed as she watched Noah play. She had kept the news of her actions from him, shielding him from the danger that loomed over their town. But her heart was heavy. She knew Black Horizon wouldn't let this strike go unanswered. Her phone buzzed. It was Maria Lopez, speaking from her makeshift monitoring station at the diner. "Rachel, I've got bad news. Black Horizon isn't retreating. They're doubling down." Rachel's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "They've deployed another team. Professional contractors, better trained, better equipped. They're converging on Haven Ridge as we speak. Do you have a count?" 20 at least," Maria replied. "And they're not hiding. They've got the kind of gear that screams military contractor." Rachel exhaled slowly. "They're coming to bury us." An hour later, Rachel, Ethan, Bill, and Maria gathered in the back room of the diner. The tension in the air was palpable as they reviewed the latest intel. Maria had intercepted radio chatter from Black Horizon operatives confirming their objective: recover the servers, eliminate loose ends, and secure the town. "They're sending their best," Maria said, her voice tense. "This isn't like the Vultures. These guys are professionals." Bill ran a hand over his face. "We don't stand a chance against that kind of firepower." "We're not fighting them head-on," Rachel said, her tone firm. "We're going to fight smart. If they want to play military games, we'll use their tactics against them." Ethan nodded. "What's the plan?" Rachel pulled out a map of Haven Ridge. "We use the terrain, force them into choke points, control their movements, and hit them where it hurts. But the most important thing is keeping the town safe. We can't let them turn this into a war zone." Bill frowned. "How do we get the town on board?" "I'll handle that," Rachel said. "People want to protect their home. They just need to know how." By sunset, Haven Ridge was transformed. Under Rachel's leadership, the townsfolk worked together to prepare their defenses. Barricades were erected at key intersections, and Maria set up surveillance drones to monitor incoming threats. The town's veterans, men and women who had once served in the military or law enforcement, took up strategic positions armed with what they could scrounge: hunting rifles, shotguns, and improvised weapons. Rachel stood in the middle of Main Street, giving instructions to a group of volunteers. Her calm, authoritative presence inspired confidence, even in those who felt out of their depth. "Remember," she said, her voice carrying over the group. "We're not trying to fight them head-on. We're buying time. For the feds to finish their investigation and for the media to keep the pressure on. Stay in your positions, work in teams, and follow the plan." As night fell, the first signs of the enemy's approach became evident. Maria's drones picked up movement on the outskirts of town. Black SUVs with tinted windows and heavily armed operatives disembarking in tight formations. "They're here," Maria said over the radio. Rachel, stationed near the school with Ethan, tightened her grip on her rifle. "Everyone, hold your positions. Wait for my signal." The contractors moved methodically, their training evident in the way they swept through the streets, clearing buildings and securing vantage points. But they underestimated the resolve of Haven Ridge. At the southern barricade, a group of volunteers led by Bill held their ground, using the terrain to funnel the attackers into a narrow alley. When the first contractor crossed the line, Bill gave the signal, and a well-placed shot shattered the silence. Chaos erupted as the contractors returned fire, but the barricade held. Bill's team used hit-and-run tactics to keep the enemy disoriented, never allowing them to gain a foothold. Near the school, Rachel's instincts told her the contractors were making a push toward the servers. The school's reinforced basement, now doubling as a secure location for federal agents and evidence, was their ultimate target. Through her earpiece, Rachel heard Ethan's voice. "They're moving toward us. 2 teams, flanking from the east and west." "Copy that," Rachel said. "Hold the east side. I'll take the west." She moved swiftly through the shadows, her training taking over. She spotted the western team, a group of 4 contractors advancing toward the school side entrance. Rachel set her sights on the leader, her fingers steady on the trigger. One shot dropped him, and she used the ensuing confusion to pick off a second. The remaining 2 scrambled for cover, but Rachel was relentless, taking them down before they could regroup. At the east entrance, Ethan's team engaged the second group, using carefully placed traps to slow their advance. Improvised explosives and tripwires turned the school grounds into a maze of hazards, forcing the contractors to retreat. "We've got them on the run," Ethan said, his voice triumphant. "Don't let up," Rachel replied. Meanwhile, Maria monitored the contractors' communications, feeding critical intel to the defenders. "They're regrouping near the north side," she reported. "Looks like they're preparing for a final push." Rachel frowned. "What about Hale? Any sign of him?" Maria hesitated. "Not yet, but I don't think he's far." Rachel's stomach tightened. Hale wouldn't sit back and let his operatives fail. He would have a contingency plan, and she needed to find it before it was too late. As the contractors launched their final assault, Rachel led a counterattack. Using the knowledge she had gained from her years in the SEALs, she coordinated the town's defenders like a seasoned commander. Every move the enemy made was met with a calculated response, turning their superior firepower into a liability. In the chaos, Rachel spotted Hale. He was directing his men from a black SUV parked near the town square, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaos around him. Rachel's jaw tightened. This was her chance to end it. She moved quickly, weaving through the battlefield with practiced precision. Hale's bodyguards spotted her approach and opened fire, but Rachel was faster. She took out 2 guards with precise shots and closed the distance between her and Hale. When she reached him, Hale raised his weapon, but Rachel disarmed him with a single, fluid motion. She pressed the barrel of her rifle to his chest. "It's over," she said coldly. Hale's lips curled into a smirk. "You think this ends with me? Black Horizon is bigger than you can imagine. You've won a battle, but you'll never win the war." Rachel's gaze was steely. "We'll see about that." With Hale captured and his contractors routed, the tide turned in Haven Ridge's favor. As the first rays of dawn broke over the town, the remaining contractors retreated, leaving their leader behind. The people of Haven Ridge emerged from their homes, battered but victorious. The town had stood together against overwhelming odds, proving that even the smallest communities could rise up against powerful forces. But Rachel knew the fight wasn't over. Black Horizon was still out there, and their reach extended far beyond Haven Ridge. As she watched the sunrise, Rachel vowed to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The day after Victor Hale's capture, Haven Ridge was alive with cautious optimism. Federal agents swarmed the town square, collecting evidence and securing the remnants of Black Horizon's operation. The contractors who had fled were now targets of a nationwide manhunt, and the media was broadcasting the story of the small town that had stood its ground against overwhelming odds. Rachel Carter watched from the steps of the diner, her arms crossed as agents loaded Hale into an armored vehicle. His cold eyes met hers through the window, a smirk curling his lips as the car pulled away. Even in custody, Hale's arrogance remained intact. Maria Lopez emerged from the diner, holding her laptop. "They've found more servers in neighboring counties," she said. "Black Horizon's network is unraveling, but it's massive, Rachel. This isn't going to end overnight." "It doesn't need to," Rachel replied, her voice steady. "As long as it ends." Inside the diner, Ethan, Bill, Clara, and a handful of other townsfolk gathered around a table covered in maps, laptops, and handwritten notes. The remnants of their battle plan had become a testament to their resistance. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice tinged with pride. "We pushed them out." "For now," Rachel cautioned. "But Black Horizon isn't going to forget this town. We're on their radar now." Clara nodded. "So what do? We can't just wait for them to come back." "We don't wait," Rachel said. "We prepare." Rachel spent the next week helping the town recover. Businesses reopened, families repaired their homes, and life slowly began to resemble something close to normal. But Rachel's mind was never far from the battle that had nearly consumed them.